Good afternoon, everyone. This shiny and beautiful day. Thank you for joining our BMI webinar today. I think 3 months ago, no one could even ever thought about the situation we are having now. Words uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, and risk became our routine reality. And quarantine is really changing the world. Businesses are facing many challenges, and we have many changes. So what are we doing now? What we should do now? Is force majeure a general situation for every company, or it's a case-by-case issue for different company? Legal obligations performance, social responsibilities, companies' values, work organization, the main issues we are solving now, each business every day. So quarantine's impact on performance of contractual obligations. Today we have a very urgent theme, which is very important for every company, every CEO, and every worker in a team. And today I would like to present Ramūnas Bičiulaitis, General Manager of Danske Bank Lithuania, and Agnė, Jonaitytė, partner of PRIMUS DERLING. Ramūnas and Agnė today will try to solve us some of issues and to answer to urgent questions which are rising each by day today for every company. And also you have already given us some questions in advance. We will go through them now. During our discussion, you can listen and also ask questions in webinar chat bot, and we will in the end go through it and also will try to answer. So perhaps let's start. The first question, of course, the main and the general one through these days, of course, can businesses suspend performance of their obligations due to COVID and quarantine? So I would like to ask this question the first, Agnė. It's more for the lawyers. So Agnė, please, what do you think?
First of all, hi everyone. And yes, this question has been very already every day and everywhere and discussed by millions of lawyers all over the world. So the short answer is no. The COVID situation in itself does not release you from your contractual obligations, because under the law, the contract between the parties has the power of the law to the contract parties. However, the law provides several institutes or instruments how to help or alleviate the aggrieved parties' side in such type of situations. So one of those grounds for helping the party in default, or the one who cannot perform the contractual obligation because of certain specific difficult conditions in such situation like COVID, it's force majeure. It's like the holy grail, it seems like, in the last days. And to shortly say what it means. So force majeure is such institute established by law which would entitle the party which cannot perform its obligation due to certain circumstances to suspend performance and to suspend performance until the conditions, difficulties pass away. However, this is a temporary measure, and there are certain strict four conditions that the party should evaluate before it may decide that these conditions are existent in the situation of specific contract and specific parties. I mean, the main message is that COVID or the quarantine as such, as the situation and circumstance, is not a force majeure, but the factual situation of a specific contractor in respect of specific contract might as well be. And there are four conditions that must be met in order to state that force majeure exists. So the first one is that such circumstances did not exist at the moment when the contract was concluded, and they could not have been foreseen by the party which cannot perform now the contract. The second one is that due to such circumstances, for instance, like quarantine, the party cannot objectively perform the obligation under the contract. The third one is that the party could not control such circumstances from occurring. It means that it was not in its power to stop or prevent such circumstance. And the fourth and the final one is that defaulting party did not assume the risk of occurrence of such situation under the contract. For instance, in certain contracts after the 2008 crisis, in like lease agreements, there sometimes is a provision saying that the tenant undertakes the risk of force majeure situations and certain situations, and the lease will not be reduced. So the important message here is, no, you are not released for the obligations. Yes, if you go through all four conditions and establish that in your specific case, in respect of your specific contract, these four circumstances exist, you may suspend performance of your obligations for the temporary, for the term until they are gone, like the quarantine terminates or whatever. But in order to be able to do that, you still need to notify the other party. If you do not notify the other party, you may not later rely on these force majeure circumstances, saying that I, for instance, will not pay you default or compensate your losses. So there are also other, like trying to renegotiate the terms of the agreement. In more systematic financial difficulties, the parties may resort to restructuring. And in the worst case scenario, which I hope will not be required, or at least not for many companies, of course, is a bankruptcy. So that's in short.
Okay, perhaps Ramūnas, have you some comment about this?
Just very short comment from my side. I do agree completely with a comment provided by Agnė. I think companies in general should be rather careful in free interpretation of force majeure, because public communication that some company is treating the situation as force majeure might damage substantially the image, the brand of the company. So I think clearly you may damage your brand, the image in the market, but actually the recovery of the damage done might take long years. So I think clearly companies should be careful in treating the force majeure situation.
Okay, Agnė, perhaps you could see regarding retail business, how does it apply for retail businesses now today? We see many cases here different in the market. How you could comment it?
Yeah, I've seen that we've received even several questions, I think, on the application of or possibility to use force majeure circumstances as a way to not perform certain contracts for retailers or in any other sector. So again, I come back to the statement which many companies do not like, saying that it depends on the situation. COVID or quarantine as such is not like universal things. It's not force majeure, but if you establish that you objectively cannot perform a specific contract because of this situation, and you go through and tick off all the four conditions that I've explained before, then yes, you also in the retail sector, you may rely on force majeure circumstances to temporarily suspend your performance of your obligations. But again, it's individual. You have to decide on case-by-case basis, and you have to communicate to the other party, informing about invoking of this force majeure circumstance. As Ramūnas very correctly noticed, that it is not only legal responsibility, I think, and we've seen good and bad examples on the market of how the situation could be handled elegantly and not so elegantly. And we've seen that also already the Ministry of Economy and Innovation, I think, reacted to one of such not so elegant actions and trying to use force majeure. After the webinar, I think, Agnė, we could share some, information, including that letter for everyone to see, what the position of the ministry is, and it it's like Ramūnas said, it's not universal. You have to be very responsible in how you qualify whether force majeure exists or not in your specific situation. And then again, that, besides the legal things, it may have a really bad reputational damage to your brand. In addition to that, I would also, like to note one more thing, like it's not only the reputational risk, but for those companies which have an obligation to publish not only financial accounts, but also social responsibility reports, they should state the truth, what's their social responsibility, how they deal with the stakeholders. And I think that at some point they may also face risks of legal claims if they've always said that they've taken care of the stakeholders, they are very socially responsible, and in case of like this COVID crisis, they send out a letter that we are not paying our employees, so we suspend payments, or we let them go altogether, or we don't care about our suppliers, and so on. So I think it's not only like this reputational damage and your clients voting by feet, but it's also at some point to especially bigger companies, listed companies who have this social responsibility reports, is to consider, how do I deal with this thing that of the values and standards that I say to the market that I comply with, and whether I as they say, do I walk the talk, or I just greenwash about how nice I am.
Ramūnai, how
just a short comment from my side, Agnė. So I think banking is also to some extent, in retail business. So clearly we got, customers, we got, private persons, other customers. Yeah. So, and again, this topic is rather hot for us right now. We are receiving, some requests from our customers, or let's say requests to, extend payment terms, or to give, some payment, loan repayment holidays. So clearly banks are facing currently, this issue. So, but at the same time, you've seen actually, and you had actually that in the market, the banks are coming up, with declaration, or statement that we are ready to accept, some such requests. We are ready to discuss, the possibility to give, some payment holidays up to 6 months, 3 months, or maybe 9 months, depending on the situation. So clearly the banks are going actually into this discussion with customers, and we are reviewing each personal, or each individual, request on case-by-case basis. We do not apply general rule for everybody that, for example, if we are receiving 10 requests, we are giving away, the answer that we are extending for 6 months. That is not the case. We are reviewing each case. We are going into the understanding of the situation with regard to each customer. And we are trying to understand whether actually the situation is caused by the virus situation and the liquidity issue faced by the customer. And usually those, liquidity issues are temporary. You can, simply support the customer for some time, for a month, or maybe for 6 months. And later on the customer is again going easily forward, and the customer is performing again. But actually, if we see that actually the issues faced by our customers are chronic, meaning they are coming from long years from behind, meaning those issues are faced by the customer for 2 years, for a year or so, our, approach is more, is not so, easy. Meaning we are not reviewing only the liquidity situation of the customer. We are going deeper, just for us to understand how bad the situation is. So again, I do agree with the comments provided by Agnė, that actually we should go into each situation, and we are going into the individual situation provided by our customers, and we are discussing with customers each situation separately.
So if I could chip in here. From practical point of view, what we see, our clients come to us and ask, do you have a template of this, letter to the bank that I'm not going to pay, or it's difficult for me to pay because of the COVID? so that I could fill in my name, you know, number, and off it goes. So our usual answer is I do have a template, but it's, you know, just stating the name, and I cannot or would like to suspend the performance, so have a holiday because of, and then you have to like basically give the whole, you know, argument why you can't. And what we advise our clients is that you have to carefully prepare this letter, and not only say I cannot perform, but also say why. Again, it would be ideal if you go through all those 4 points that I've mentioned to prove that force majeure exists in your case. And we also support, you know, advise our clients to already send a document with the supporting documents, so that, you know, the bank, both parties actually would save time, and, you know, Ramūnas people would not have to come back and say, give me that paper or show me that, explain this. So my advice, practical one, would be that, you know, given that this is an individual case-by-case thing for every contract, please prepare, write as much substance as you can to support your argument, and provide supporting documents if you want the answer, and probably, hopefully, positive answer from the bank to speed up the process.
Correct.
Okay, so we have one more question regarding employment contracts. If the situation continues, employers will need to squeeze the expenses and most likely cut salaries or layout of people. What do you expect to happen in Vilnius job market? More layoffs or more salary adjustments in near future? What is easier for employer according to Lithuania's work law?
I can shortly start. I can start actually the comment, and I believe, you know, Agnė, later on we will come up, you know, with additional comments from your side. So I think the business, each of us, we have already faced actually the situation when we have to make actually the decision what is right with regard to the business, with regard to our employees, and how to approach actually current situation, what we got in the market and in business overall. So I think first of all we have to reply to the question how severe the impact coming because of the virus is on each individual business. There are some businesses, like, for example, I don't know, restaurants, like transportation sector, some of retail, let's say, business, they are impacted strongly. I think some of them will not survive. So I think for the owners of those businesses, it is important to reply right away to find, you know, the answer, whether they can find, you know, some measures or, let's say, some solution for them to adapt to the situation what we have currently in the market, or, let's say, to adapt to the changes in the environment. As an example, I believe, you know, that would be if we got, you know, some restaurant, maybe it is possible to provide, you know, some drive-in food, for example, or simply delivery to homes of the food. Maybe in this way the business could adapt potentially. We got, you know, some businesses like, for example, telecommunications. I think they got currently very hot period of time, meaning they got, you know, significant traffic, increased traffic. They are facing to some extent, you know, some, let's say, technical issues regarding the capacities. Maybe they will have to invest additionally. Maybe they will have to attract additional employees. So clearly, the business right now in the current situation is impacted in a different way. The impact is rather diversified. So first of all, I think the question is for the business owner, how he or she, or let's say the shareholders, are supposed to react. Is it possible to keep the business running, or it is better to shut down and to reduce, you know, the losses and to re-establish the business after some time? Maybe that would be the option for us to consider. When we talk about, you know, the employees in the bank, we have also, you know, considered what's next. Actually, 2 weeks ago, we had been running on daily basis so-called crisis management team meetings, and we have been preparing actually for the situation what we have currently. So back like 10 days ago on Friday in the evening, we have decided that actually starting from Monday, last Monday, nobody in the bank will come to the office, or let's say we are trying to reduce the number of employees who are supposed to come to the office. So basically, right from the first day, we had 4% of employees coming to the office still, but 96% they were staying at home already and working from remote distance, meaning they were using, VPN connection, and they were still supporting, the whole Danske Bank group, including other countries. As you know, currently in Vilnius, we got 3,700 employees. 3,700 employees. So it was not really, easy task for us to manage, such a number of employees and to ensure, their workplaces from on remote distance from home. So therefore, we have decided that we are trying to, let's say, transfer employees to the home office, and to ensure, and we have decided that actually all of them will receive, 100% of salary, including those employees who are not able to perform, to be honest. They are not able to run, the work tasks from home because of children. They got, for example, up to 7 years old, children who cannot go to kindergarten, and they are supposed to get, the care of parents. And parents, they are interfered, and they cannot simply, deliver what is needed for the bank. So, including those employees, we are still keeping actually 100% pay to those employees. But the law in Lithuania states that in such cases when an employee cannot, let's say, perform because of the children, he or she may get, 66% compensation from Sodra, from social insurance. So that is 66% compensation in comparison to salary what he or she had before, let's say, the situation of what we have currently. So basically, the option for the bank was also to support, the position of social insurance company, and to also propose, 66%. But the decision was done to go forward with 100%. There is also stated in the law that in case of idle time, employer may go to 40% of salary, which is paid to employees. So that is again the option which is supposed to be analyzed and addressed by each business. So clearly we got, some options, including paying, or let's say keeping the salary in the level of 100%, reducing based on the threshold which is communicated in the law by, let's say, insurance law by Sodra. We may also go down to 40% if we got, some idle time for our employees. So again, I think there are some options, there are possibilities to address, and each business, I believe, should make, the required decision.
Agnė, perhaps you can add something?
Yeah, but first of all, I want to say kudos to Danske. I really admire you. This social responsibility is just an example, of how taking care of your employees, and also having in mind, that not to overuse or abuse the state help and already stretched social security system. So admire it a lot. So from the legal point of view, so again, I know that and how much clients hear the answer, it depends. And lawyers use it a lot, but in this situation, and I think you already got from Ramūnas' presentation of this issue, that it depends. And what we actually advise the clients and help them to do this together with them, and they are usually CFO and CEO, is to plan, consider for the whole year, for 3, for 6 months, and for the whole year, how you see your business will be going, both financially and, strategically. Do you see that you will be in business after 6 months? And on this also, it depends very much what the decision would be. The law has many instruments, as Ramūnas already mentioned. It's idle time is, making all employees redundant, remote work, many things to do, but we would suggest, as I told, to have this strategic and financial planning meeting where you do an Excel sheet or all the calculations of each option. But it's not only the mathematics like 60, 40%, 90%, but also having in mind all those legal issues. Like if you take the social support, all those, like compensations for idle time from the social security and state support, then you have to have in mind that it's not only for the term that you use the support, but you have to ensure that you will retain all those workplaces for which you got the support for plus 3 months. So this should be scheduled and, you know, calculated in your model too. So you have to calculate that you will be in business and will be able to keep the, you know, workplaces for that amount of time. Then again, maybe at some points, and depending on the situation, on the business, maybe for some companies, making employees redundant, even, you know, that knowing that you will have to pay their release payments, it might be also a valid option. So it depends a lot on, you know, what business are you in? How do you see yourself and your company doing in 3, 6, and we advise 12 months? And calculate each position. And in addition to legal things, how long you have to keep the workplace after, you know, the social support stops. I would also advise much like, you know, to take into account the social responsibility matters, as Ramūnas mentioned. Because, you know, it's not, you are not the only one affected. We are all in the same boat.
Yeah, we are now on the same page, and I would like to ask a question for Ramūnas, more economical question. Usually we guidelines for reducing amount of cash in a balance sheet, but in times of such crisis as we see in present day, this is the exact reason why companies are unable to pay the suppliers and employees. What would be an optimal cash reserve to be able to handle such unexpected events? And when we should say that company has enough cash and should spend all the extra money on investments or dividends. So it's more financial questions. So Ramūnas, how you could?
You know, I remember, let's see, one article, not article actually, but The Economist magazine, and on the cover of The Economist magazine back in 2008, autumn of 2008, it was stated, it was, you know, quoted that cash is no longer king, cash is God. So in the time of crisis, clearly, you know, liquidity is extremely important. So clearly each business should think, you know, what cash or liquidity reserve the business is keeping. So I think there are some certain, you know, tools which can be used by business. And one of those tools is, you know, very, very simple one, which is known to everybody. That is, you know, simple overdraft. Overdraft, which is available in each bank, and basically each bank can provide. And I think clearly each business should have, you know, the overdraft facility available. So when, you know, crisis or let's say turbulent time hits, clearly overdraft facility can be used by each business. And that is, you know, quite a good tool for us to manage off, or let's say to equalize our cash flows, or let's say to keep our liquidity on the required level. Again, I think there is, you know, a lot of theories about, you know, the economical cycle, at which point of time we are supposed to invest, at which point of time we are supposed to accumulate, you know, some reserves. And I guess each of us, we know that the best timing for investment is, you know, the crisis period, if of course, you know, some cash is available for investments. But again, when we talk about, you know, the high peak, or let's say the peak of the cycle, again, I think it is clearly known to everybody that we are supposed to reduce our investments. We are supposed to accumulate, you know, some cash. We are supposed to accumulate, you know, some reserves. That is theory, but I guess nobody knows when virus will hit, and nobody knew at which point of time we will be hit by virus. So clearly, each time it is easy to look back and to comment what was supposed to be done by business. But it is clearly very difficult to make the decision and to recognize, you know, the point of time when we are supposed to accumulate, you know, some reserves. So I think, you know, I think the business, the industry, banks, we are adapting. We are trying to understand what is needed now. And therefore, I love actually the, let's say, the measures taken by the government. I like, you know, the, let's say, the mood in general, which is currently in the market. And everybody are trying to act in a rather social responsible way. by means of finding, some support means to each other, including, the business to business also support. So I would advocate very much, to go forward this way and try to overcome current turbulent time together. Let's think, what is needed for hospitals, what is needed for the business. Let's think what is needed for our employees, and let's try to find, suitable means, suitable tools for us to overcome current turbulent time. It will not last forever.
Yes, you're right. I think in these days, the most important to communicate, to talk to each other, to share our pains. And I think only this sharing will help to find the best solution also for the companies and from a legal side and in relationship with banks and with the loans and other issues. So, and the last question which I would have now.
I'm sorry, Agnė, if I may chip in, I have a couple of questions of Ramūnas. I really liked your explanation about liquidity by listening to you. I just, from top of my head, I have two questions. One, about the overdrafts. It is good to have it, to have it in, in your drawer in case crisis hits you. But if it hasn't been utilized before the crisis or quarantine or COVID, and I come to you, and say, hi, Danske, can I now draw down on this facility? What would you say? Because you could say, sorry, it's force majeure, and probably your financial situation is not that good anymore. I have to reevaluate, and whatever you do. I know the legal answer, but I think the practicalities would help. And the second one, you said if you have cash, crisis is a good time to invest. Yes, you could get some things cheaper, but how can you be sure? Because not many companies, especially the Lithuanian ones, do publish forecasts about their financial situation, and if they do not do that, they would not report on what impact COVID will have on their financial situation. That's one, even though I know ESMA's guidelines that you should report, but most of them will not. I think so. I haven't seen it yet, but probably not. So how do you select the right asset to invest into if you don't know how it will perform, and how hard had it been hit already?
So starting from your first question, I think banks are operational. There is no breakdowns in the banking system, and basically all banks, they are supporting the customers, and that was declared, and that is ongoing. So I think clearly, if required, you can go to your home bank, to the bank which was always supporting you in your daily operations, daily payments. And then I think, banks will support going forward. So if needed, I believe, overdraft facility will be provided, even for current days. Of course, banks will look into your financial statements, but I believe, first of all, banks will look into the business, what you had, but not your, let's say, recent issues related with COVID. Okay. So I think banks got clear interest in in developing their own business, in getting one more customer and supporting this customer. When we talk about investments, the same goes for investments. I believe if you got a decent business plan with clear evidence of what kind of cash flows your business was generating and what kind of investment you are going to do. I've seen actually some businesses who were investing back in 2009 to 2010, and they went out of the crisis period in really a strong position. They had already the capacities they needed, and they were able to boost their production quite fast as soon as they had demand coming into their books. So clearly, I think the downturn is quite suitable time for investments. Of course, everybody is careful. Banks are also, judging, or let's say they are reviewing, what risks we have with regard to each business case. But banks are ready to, lend money, and additional cheap money actually are coming from ECB. It was already announced that LTRO, so-called facility LTRO 3, is coming from ECB. And this means that banks will be getting, cheap money for the price of minus 75 basis points, which is 0.75%. For this price, they will be getting, quite substantial amounts, and they are supposed to lend those amounts to the business. So clearly, money is there, and we got, the required funds to lend to business.
Very good to hear. One more question, because I know that also the alternative financing options are springing up and, getting speed in the situation. And I was wondering what the bank's, position would be. How would you look in, if your client would come and say, okay, maybe I cannot get an overdraft from you, but I need permission, your permission as my home bank, to go to those alternative sources. Can you give me a permission to, I don't know, borrow on higher or finance invoice financing on quite high rate?
In general, banks cannot restrict of going somewhere else and getting, additional funds. Of course, banks should get, the understanding what is done by the customer. If the customer got, already some commitments to the bank, and clearly, if some customer got, some pledge or let's say collateral given to the bank, and he or she would like to use actually the same collateral to pledge somewhere else, of course, that would be an issue for the home bank. But overall, banks cannot restrict to go somewhere else and to get additional funding.
Okay, because I was thinking about restriction on taking on more debt on the balance sheet, but okay.
Thank you. And the last question, Agnė, is for you. If a certificate of a Chamber of Commerce in industry and crafts necessary to be able to claim existence of a force majeure, what about this certificate of a Chamber of Commerce and then how to deal with it?
This is also one of the very popular questions in the recent days, the certificates. So many lawyers already, I think, commented, it is not a necessary thing. The court, it might be necessary if you go to court. It might be, like a practical thing to have if you go to court because the other party does not agree to your establishment of force majeure circumstances and request your liability. But the thing is, the court will each time decide by itself. The certificate would be an additional evidence, but it will not limit the court's decision, and the court will decide on its own. Probably in this situation, the certificate might be of practical value if your counterparty is in a company registered and taking, operations in another country. So if you want to write them a letter and saying, sorry, I have force majeure circumstances, I will not be able to perform my obligations for a certain period of time until they last. And here is the certificate state confirming and showing you that, these circumstances do really exist. These limitations do really exist, and they have certain impact on my performance. So I think that might help and show goodwill from you, the party who may not be able to perform your obligations for a certain time. And it's, may help you deal with the other party if it's in a foreign country. But again, even with that letter, if you go to court because you disagree, court will still have to establish this on its own motion.
I can just compliment Agnė that in case of banks, if somebody is coming and presenting, the certificate, this doesn't help a lot. Meaning banks will request, still to comment, to provide simple comment on the situation, what is faced by the company or private person. So basically the company. And so basically it is better to come up, with straightforward and clear story, what has happened, how strongly the company was damaged by COVID, and why the business is struggling right now. So certificates will not help here.
That's a very good practical point, and also from the practical point of view, you have to get a certificate for each agreement and for each counterparty, and one certificate costs, if I'm not mistaken, 200 euros. So, just do your math. So consider if it's really necessary. It would be helpful to have one. Again, I think we also have some other questions, for instance, about mediation. If we have time, maybe we can cover that one too.
Yeah, there was one question. I think it was a question if mediation helping in this force majeure situations solving, and how it with the legal part goes.
I'm not exactly sure about mediation, but I think maybe it was like negotiation, not mediation. But yes, as I think me and Ramūnas have told a number of times, talking to the other party is key, and that's the best thing you can do. So yes, you just, from my personal perspective, maybe legally possible, but marching in and saying, I stop now and I'm not going to pay you because of this, it's not such a good cooperational idea if you want to continue the relationship after the COVID. So yes, our advice is review the agreement carefully, consider your circumstances, write a letter and go to talk and negotiate with your counterparty. And when doing that, consider that the other party is in the same boat. COVID is universal. So, negotiation is always the key.
Yeah.
I agree completely. Yes.
And so thank you very much, everyone who have joined our webinar. Really, to finalize, I think we all on the same page now. All businesses are on the same page. Once are in a better situation, once perhaps in a worse. It depends on the industry where business is. However, there is always a possibility to talk, to go to solve problems together and find the issue, how to solve it together. I think the most important, the most important to take responsibility and to say that we can do. And I think and believe that those who are looking always find a way out. And after, if you will have any questions, we will send you an email and with link and contacts of Agnė. She will help more from legal side, because we really couldn't observe many questions and themes which covers legal issues at the moment. So let's keep in touch. And thank you one more time, Ramūnas and Agnė. It's really a big pleasure. Thank you, my BMI team, who helped to organize this webinar. We will be keeping doing it, and we hope that together really we will find solutions and we'll go forward. So thank you very much. Have a nice day, good mood, and we will win. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.